Hello everyone and welcome back to part two of this video course. In our previous class, we took a look at how to set up a basic block out for our 3D toy robot. We took a look at how to find reference, what kind of things to watch out for, and now we're going to continue with actually editing some of our geometry. So let's start actually by selecting this torso, and let's hide it real quick. We can hide a selection by clicking it and then pressing H, and we can see in our outliner that whenever we do that, it also grays out that part of our geometry, that object that we had selected. And if we want to have it emerge again, we just select it and press H again. So there we go. Now what I want to do to this shoulder joint right here is I want to select these triangles on the inside and extrude them out in this direction so that our joint actually attaches to our torso. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these triangles first, and I'm going to give them an inset. Um, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to again, we hold down right mouse button to select face, and then I'm just going to drag and select like that. And then because I don't need these circumference faces around the circumference, I'm just going to deselect them by holding down Control. So again, just you can select everything by dragging, and then by holding down Control, you can deselect in the same way. Um, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Shift and hold down right mouse button, and you'll see we'll get another new marking menu. We talked about the marking menus in a previous video real quick, and this is another new one that we're going to use. And this brings up all of our polygonal editing tools, or at least most of them, the ones that we will most likely be using. And you can see that down here we have a whole bunch of tools that we can use. These are the most commonly used ones. And right now we're going to go for extrude face. And when we click that, you'll see that we get a little window right here, which basically represents our current active node. We also talked about nodes in the previous video, so if you haven't seen that one, go watch that one first. And you will also see that we get a different gizmo. And right now, if I, for instance, click this arrow right here and start dragging it, you can see that we can start extruding um, the shoulder joint in that direction. But what I want to do right now, before I do that, is I actually want to inset these faces. So we get another sort of circle of polygons like that we can sort of create an edge with. So I'm going to go over to this window, this poly extrude phase 1 node, and I'm going to drag on the offset a little bit. And you'll see that when I do that, uh, even though it's an extrude operation, it doesn't really create new geometry in the on the z-axis like we showed just like I showed you before, but it sort of gives you this extra geometry around the perimeter of the cylinder. So let's just we can also again click it to give it a precise input. I'm gonna give it an input of 15, and once we've done that, now we want to continue with doing an actual extrusion in that direction. So we can commit any operation by just clicking outside of our model somewhere in the viewport, and you'll see that now we have this this new geometry right here in the middle. However, what we can also do, if I do Control Z real quick, is instead of doing another operation, we can press G, and what that does is it actually commits the previous operation and gives us an entirely new one right after. So now we can again sort of speed up our workflow. Instead of having to go to that marking menu again, we can just press G and do the same thing again. And now I want to drag this out a bit so we can get that nice edge on our hinge, on our shoulder hinge. So click outside, And now if I bring up my torso again, you can see we've sort of attached that shoulder joint to the torso. And I actually want to drag it down a little bit like that. So now it sits in there nicely. So um, let's, before we move on, let's give this guy a neck because his head is still floating around in nothingness. And I'm just gonna do that by copying his leg real quick. And I'm just gonna scale it down. Again, pressing R to bring up the scaling tool. And as we discussed in the previous video, this the reason we can't adjust the polycylinder node like we can with the leg is because we've just made a copy, and it commits, it bakes that information into our model. So we have to proceed with the scale tool, but that's fine. That's all we need. So now he has a bit of a neck like that. So let's see what else we can do. Let's start by giving him a couple of knees as well. We want to sort of do the same thing for his leg as we did for his arm. So let's again make a copy of this joint right here and drag it down like that. And now, because um, this is an original primitive, we can still actually adjust the height. Let's make it a bit smaller because it just needs to be an upper leg for now. I'm going to rotate it real quick. Again, pressing J to snap rotate it like this, and then position it a bit better. And then I'm going to actually, let's just copy this information. In this case, if I want to have them aligned, I can just copy the information on the x-axis that we have right here and paste it like so, so that now they're perfectly aligned with each other. There's another way of doing this well. There's actually an entirely separate align tool that you can use to do stuff like this, but I'm not going to use that right now because it's a bit overkill. It's a bit unnecessary. We just need to have uh, we just need to align two things, so it's not really necessary. I'm going to snap rotate this as well to create his calf, I guess, his bottom joint, and yeah, let's do it like that. And then I might as well just copy this again to create a little ankle for him. And I'm going to align my foot as well real quick. There we go. So now we pretty much have the shape of a robot. Actually, let me give him some hands as well, real quick. So I'm gonna copy his elbow joint again, and I'm gonna rescale it a little bit using R for scale. And it's not really aligned either. It doesn't really matter that much. There you go. We'll do something like that. So now we can give him a hand. And actually, let's start by doing that. Let's give him a hand. And I think the way we're going to do that is we're just going to create a new primitive called a torus, um, which is you can select by going to the top of your screen again. But actually, instead of selecting it right there, let me show you another marking menu. If you hold down, if you don't have anything selected and you hold down Shift and then right mouse button, you'll bring up a marking menu which lets you select a couple of different primitives as well. And as you can see, we actually have a lot of different options compared to what we have on the top of our screen. So we have even more things that we can use to start creating uh, a model. And I said we're going to use a torus, but I see that we also have a pipe available. So let's actually do a pipe. So I'm going to drag it. Doesn't have to be that big. Like that. And then the thickness like that. And this is going to be sort of like a claw hand. Snap rotate with J. I actually want to make it a little bit bigger. So let's make the radius 0.7. And I don't think we need that many subdivisions. Let's give it 18 subdivisions is good. Let's see here. And I want to make it a bit thicker as well. Or is that that's the wrong one. I need to change the height. So let's make the height 0.8. Actually, let's make the height 1. That should be fine. So now he sort of has like a ring. But what we're going to do to make this into a claw is I actually want to hold down right mouse button and go to face. And then let me show you another way of selecting multiple um, multiple polygons that is very useful. So in 3D modeling, we often talk of loops, and what we mean by loops is basically any type of components, whether it's edges or vertices or faces that are adjacent to each other and connect in a loop. So for instance, the circumference right here of this pipe, what it's called, this primitive is called a pipe. This is the loop. So what happens if I want to select all of them? I mean, I could do this, for instance, but then I also select the inside of this pipe, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to select one, and then I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to double click on a next one. And now you can see that it selects the entire loop of faces around this pipe right here. And you can do the same with edges. For instance, if I select this edge and then double click on the next one, it selects all the edges in that loop. And the same could be said for instance, the edges right here. So these four edges that make up uh, um, the profile of this tube, they're also in a loop. So if I click this one, oops, if I click this one and then hold down Shift and double click this one, you'll see that it selects all the edges on the other side as well. So learning to select things in edge loops is again something that's really useful and that's really going to help you speed up your workflow. Um, so in this case, what I want to do is I want to delete these faces right here that I'm selecting. But as you can see, because we're dealing with uh, a round object and our selection box is square, it can be a bit tricky to select everything that we want. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to select my edge and I'm going to double click to select the entire loop. And then I'm going to hold down Control and right mouse button. And this will bring up once again another marking menu, which is very useful. And this is what I guess is called the selection menu. And this allows us to um, switch from one component to the other in terms of selection. So for instance, we now have this edge loop selected, but we want to select all the polygons that are adjacent to that selection. So if I hold down Control and right mouse button, I can go to this option right here that says two faces. And I have to double drag because again, sometimes marking menus have menus within them. So I have to go two faces and then two faces again. I can also go two face perimeter, but we're not going to use that. So I'm going to go two faces. And now you see that it's selected all of the polygons that are connected or adjacent to that loop that we had selected, that edge loop. And now we can just press delete. And now you can see that we sort of have this claw, uh, this robot claw. But now, of course, we have another problem because now you can see we've created two holes in our geometry, and that's generally something we want to avoid. So we have to fix that. And well, there are multiple ways of fixing this, but the quickest way is to again select the entire loop, and we can do that by simply double clicking this time. The reason we don't have to shift and double click for this loop is because there's no other direction for this loop to go basically. So the only, when you double click, Maya just takes a look at what's the shortest loop it can select and selects that loop. And because there's no other geometry right here, because there's a hole, you can just double click and select the entire loop. And because we want to edit our geometry, we're going to go to our geometry tools again by holding Shift and right mouse button. And then there should be an option for fill hole right here. And if we click that, it just simply places a polygon inside that hole. So we can do the same for the other hole. Double click, shift right mouse button, and then fill hole. And now you can see we have our claw hand thingamajig. So this is already sort of starting to look like a robot, but it's still very blocky, and I want to make it a bit more, even when things are mechanical in nature, you'll never see like super hard edges like we have on these cubes right here on the head and on the torso and even on the um, on the joint right here, the shoulder joint. Talking is difficult sometimes. So what I want to do is something called a bevel, and a bevel is basically, you can sort of compare it to like grinding off or shaving off a hard edge. If you've ever like sanded a plank or a cabinet or something, where you wanted to sort of create a smoother edge on something, we're going to do the exact same thing but in 3D. So let's start with the head. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the edges. So I'm going to hold down right mouse button and go to edge and just select all of them. And then once again, I'm going to hold down shift and then right mouse button to select bevel edge. Now you can see it's already doing something quite drastic. It's basically shaved off a whole bunch of material, I guess you could call it, or geometry from our initial box. So we want to reduce that a little bit, and we can do that by adjusting the fraction. So let's just go with a fraction of zero point 0.1. Um, but it's still not really a soft edge. It's just sort of like a cutoff, and it's still quite hard. So what we want to do in order to get that nice rounded edge is we want to increase the amount of segments that it has. So now what it basically does is it does the same operation, but it tells the software, hey, I want to have another division that sort of eases the transition between these two edges. Um, and so that's how we get a nice soft transition like this. We can also adjust that by adjusting the depth. So we can even go inverse if we want to, if we drag the depth to -1, or we can do something like this where it's just a little bit rounded off. In my case, I just want to have a nice smooth transition, so I'm going to keep it the depth to 1. And again, just click anywhere outside to commit that operation. So let's do that with some of our other parts as well. Let's uh, soften these edges as well. And again, I could go shift right mouse button and do another bevel edge, or I can press G and it immediately gives me the right tool to do that. So I'm going to adjust a fraction again. Let's go with a fraction of, let's see here. Yeah, zero point 0.1 is good. And add another segment. And yeah, that's good. Now I want to do this to the arm as well, but before I do that, I think I want to add a bit more detail to it. And let me actually pull up my reference again. So for instance, this robot doesn't really have it, but I want to create a little bit more detail on my arm instead of just having this block shape. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to select these faces right here, and actually. Mm, Yeah, let's do that right now. I was thinking what was a good way to proceed from here, but yeah, I can show you that right now. So as you'll see, the more we sort of start building up this model, the more different objects we get. Like we already have, I don't know, 10 objects or something. When we're going to start adding details, it's going to be even more. So we might want to commit to merging some of these elements so we get one object instead of having all these different objects. So the way we do that is we actually just select everything by holding down Shift and then selecting all the things that we want to have connected. And let me actually, before I do that, let me change this a little bit because I don't want um, so what I'm doing right now is I'm making sure that where this claw clips into the joint right here, that these edges are not touching any other edges. And the reason I'm doing that is because later on, I want to get rid of everything that I don't see. So right now, for instance, let me actually show you guys. If you go up to the top of the viewport and click this little see-through box right here that says wireframe, you'll get this view and you get a better idea of everything that's sort of stuck inside of each other. So you can see that I have this sort of hand selected, but there's all these polygons inside that I don't see and I want to get rid of them at some point. I'm not going to do that now. I'll do that later when I'm sort of done with creating all the details and I want to clean up my model. But I already know that I want to get rid of that at one point. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that um, these um, these edges right here don't touch these edges right here. And the reason for that is because at some point when we merge everything together, we need to create some extra edges that go from where this edge meets this polygon to this vertex right here. It's maybe a bit confusing, but in time it'll make sense. So I'm just going to make sure that these edges don't touch for now. So they're sort of floating nicely in the middle of that face, which is good. So let's merge all of this into one object. And we do that by selecting everything by holding down Shift, like so. And then I'm gonna go to, let's see here, combine. So again, I'm holding down Shift right mouse button, and then I'm gonna go down to this option here that says combine. And now you can see that it's created a new shape, which is the entire arm, which is can be useful because, for instance, right now, if we want to rotate it, even though the pivot is in the wrong direction, it rotates the entire thing at once. So, um, but we can also see, if we take a look at our outliner, that we've got a whole bunch of new stuff, like all these different little transform thingamajigs. And what are all these things, and why are they all in our outliner, and why are these grayed out and these aren't? It can be a bit confusing. And actually, when we go to our node editor again, so let's go to Windows and Node Editor, and when we click this little button right here, the little square with the two white arrows, you can see something that starts to resemble what I was talking about in the previous video. We're starting to create this big spaghetti of nodes, and most of these we really don't need and we really don't want. And to make sure that our software doesn't crash, we're going to get rid of these. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to go up to Edit, and then go to delete all by type, and then go to history. And now you see that it sort of cleans up all our nodes. We now just have a, a cylinder shape and a P cylinder, and that's all we really need for now for this thing. Alternatively, if we don't want to go up to uh, that menu all the time and go edit delete by type, we can also do a shortcut that's Alt Shift D, which is the shortcut for delete by type. history. So there we go. Um, and this might actually be a good point as well to showcase another very useful, actually two very useful features of Maya. So actually make the three very useful features of Maya. I'm going to show a lot in one go. I'm very efficient like that. If we go over to the left of our screen right here, beneath our tools, you can see there's another set of symbols. And if we click this one right here, the four squares, you'll see that we get a different kind of view. Um, because Maya by default has four different cameras that you can use. Up until now, we've just been using the perspective camera, which is just this 3D view where we can sort of rotate around our model and do all of the fun stuff that we've been doing so far. But if you want to do something that's a bit more precise of that, or that requires lining something up along one axis, there's also a top view, a front view, and a side view. Basically, three views, each of which eliminate one axis, to make it simple. Um, and we can access them by pressing the space bar. And now you see that we get four extra squares. And I can see now that I forgot to do something in the very beginning of our tutorial. Namely, I forgot to fix my other cameras in the same way that I fixed my perspective camera. So um, I'm gonna change that real quick. If I can. Oh, there we go. So I still need to adjust the near and far clipping planes like I did uh, with my other perspective camera. So let me just fix that real quick so we can get to work. There we go. And now you'll see them appearing as well. Right. So as you can see, if I hover over one of these two other perspectives, I get the exact same camera controls, only in just in two dimensions. So I can scroll to zoom in and out, and use Alt and middle mouse button to pan around like that. Um, and let me also enable the wireframe overlay in each one of these, so we can see what we're doing like that. So let's go to the side view. So again, if I press spacebar, I can very quickly switch between these views simply by hovering over them and then pressing spacebar. Alternatively, if you hold down spacebar, you get a whole bunch of you get once again another marking menu, one that I don't use very often. But if you hold down spacebar and go right mouse button, you can also switch to these views directly if you want to. But I find it easiest to just switch by pressing spacebar once and then hovering over the one that you want to go to. So we just turned our arm into one object, but there's a problem because if we turn our arm, it doesn't stay in place. The shoulder joint just rotates randomly over there, and we don't want that. We want to be able to rotate it like a real arm. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our move tool, and when you hold down the D key, you'll see that our little gizmo changes once again. It gets this little circle on the inside and a bigger circle that we can manipulate. And this works in perspective view as well, by the way, just so you see. But what this does is this gives us a way to edit our pivot. So again, the pivot is sort of the origin of your model, and it defines uh, from which point your model rotates, basically. Um, and if we want to edit it, we hold down D and we can drag it around like this. So now we can zoom in a little bit and sort of place it in the center of our shoulder. And now you'll see, and we place it there, that when we go back to our rotate tool, now it rotates like a real arm would, or a real robot arm, I guess. However, sometimes you want to place your pivot precisely somewhere in your geometry or in your model where you can rotate it again. So there's another way of doing this that's very simple and very useful as well. So when we hold down D, we get this sort of edit pivot mode. But then when we hold down V, we enable another mode, which is really useful. So I'm now pressing down on D and V at the same time. I can also let go of D real quick, and you'll see that my transform gizmo also changes when I just press V. And this indicates that we've entered uh, a different type of moving, which is the snap move. So snap move basically means that wherever we move our move tool, it snaps to vertices, to points, basically. And this works for points and for other types of geometry as well. Um, so that can be really useful. So if we want to center our pivot for our arm precisely in the middle of our shoulder joint, all we have to do is press down on D and V at the same time and then drag it over and it'll snap directly to the center of our shoulder joint. And now it's perfectly centered and whoops, there we go. And you'll see that if we rotate it, it rotates like a real leg, like that. So very useful. Um, you'll see that it has now moved our pivot from being in the center of our geometry to being sort of on the outside because we snapped it to this point. Um, for now, that doesn't really matter. That's okay. That's fine. If you want to have it back in the center over here, one thing that I would do to sort of cheat it, um, because like an easy, quick way to fix it is I would create another edge right in the middle of this to snap it to over one axis, and I can show you how to do that real quick. Because that allows me to showcase some other modeling tools as well. So another tool you'll be using a lot is called the quick cut, the multi-cut tool. Apologies, multi-cut. I don't know why I call it quick cut. It's called multi-cut. And we can select it again by holding down shift and then right mouse button and hovering over multi-cut. And now you see our cursors change as well. And what multi-cut allows us to do is a couple of things. First of all, we can um, select a vertex like this and then cut to another vertex and get a nice clean line along our face, and then um, right mouse click anywhere outside of our model to commit it. We can also cut between edges. So for instance, we can do something like this and just create a cut that goes like that and creates some extra polygons. But we can also hold down Control, and now it brings up this loop cut, which allows you to sort of evenly cut all the faces that are adjacent to each other in a single loop. Um, and we can just sort of place a thing in the middle right there and then snap our pivot to the coordinates that are equal to the x coordinates of this vertex right here. But again, we're doing this sort of by eye, so it's not going to be the exact center of where we want it to be unless we hold down Control with our multi-cut tool and then press the middle mouse button. And then no matter where you are, it will always cut directly to the center of whatever loop you have selected. So that's a very quick and easy way to sort of divide a loop evenly along a certain axis. So if I now want to move uh, my pivot to the center of my joint again, all I have to do is hold down D and V and then drag along the x-axis and just hover over one of these vertices. And now I know that it's exactly aligned to the middle of where it used to be. So, and this is basically how box modeling works. These are pretty much all the tools that you need: multi-cut, extrude, snap, all that stuff. Bevel, of course, is just pretty much all you need to do some very basic box modeling like this, and it can get you a long way if you get more creative with it. So let's keep going. Um, Before I started doing this, what I wanted to do is create some more detail in these arms right here. So now that it's one object, I can select them both at the same time, and I can do another extrusion with an offset like this. Um, like that. And then I'm going to press G to repeat it again. And now I can sort of scale it inward like that. And it gives a bit of this sort of like a more industrial look, like it's really made out of plate metal or something. And actually, what's cool if maybe we can scale it down a little bit. Um, Let me see if I can do something with constraints real quick. Uh, so one thing that can be very useful as well is modeling with constraints. And basically, constraints allow you to scale or move something along a certain um, axis or a certain property of the model. For instance, right now I have these inner faces selected, and I want to scale them down a little bit so I get a nice um, sort of a nice inward slope to my model. But instead of doing it like this, which I mean sort of gets the desired effect, but just on one side and creates this very ugly inside on the other side, I can go to the right of my screen right here, and in my modeling toolkit, I can go to transform constraint and select surface slide. And now I should be able to, that doesn't really work the way I hoped it would. Um, Let me see if I cannot, there we go, tool settings. Um, Transform constraint is the same thing, I think, but let's just, yeah, it does the same. Yeah, let's leave that for now. I'll get back to that later. For now, if you want to get that desired effect, I guess we can just sort of do it manually like this, and just sort of scale them inward, which works as well. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so as you can see, just by doing a couple of these simple transforms and a couple of these simple extrusions, we can get some pretty cool detail going. I still think some of these edges are too hard, so I'm going to do something about that. So again, I'm going to double click so I can select the entire loop, and I'm just going to select all of this like so, and I'm going to do another bevel. And actually, that looks kind of cool to keep it sort of not entirely smooth, but sort of shaved off. Yeah, let's do that. That looks pretty sick. I'm just going to take a look how that looks without the highlights. That looks pretty cool. Yeah, let's go with that. Um, Next, I also want to create some more detail in these joints to give the impression that they actually have some sort of machinery going on inside them. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select the center vertices of all these joints. And I'm going to use our selection marking menu again. So I'm going to hold down Control and then right mouse button. Apologies. And I'm going to go two faces. And it's going to select all of the triangles adjacent to that um, vertex. And now what I want to do is I want to extrude them as well with an offset. That's the wrong side. Yeah, 15 should be good. And I'm going to press G to repeat my command. I'm going to inset them a bit like that. And I'm going to press G once again to repeat my command once more. And I'm going to give them another offset. And let's see here. Yeah, let's call it, do that. Offset of 10. I'm sort of talking to myself because I'm I have to think and explain at the same time. so it might sound a bit weird. Hit G again and do this once more. And now I actually do want to see if this works with the surface slide. If I scale this down, it still doesn't work. I'm not really getting the effect that I want to, but that's fine. Yeah, let's do something like that. That looks cool. So again, you can see with just a couple of these tricks, you can get some pretty nice detail on that arm. Let's do the same for the leg real quick. So I'm actually going to start out by actually what I think what I want to do with this. I'm not sure what I want to do with this yet. So let's just do them one by one. It should look fine. So let's select all the outside edges and do a bevel first. Bevel edge, and let's give it a little bit of a lower fraction. 0.1 should be good. Yeah, that looks cool. And then let's do this one as well. Oops, bevel edge. Starting to look like something. I'm gonna leave the leg for now, I think. Just this is something that you'll start to notice when you start doing more modeling on your own. You might think you're onto something by doing some making some additions to your geometry, and then you think, "Ah, I'm not sure about what I want to do with that." So for now, I'm gonna switch over to doing something else, and we'll get back to that later. Let's take a look at the head because we haven't really given any. Uh, much thought to the head. And I can actually see right now that it's not exactly aligned perfectly. So I'm gonna, yeah, it's not really aligned on the x-axis very well. And the neck is a little bit big, so I'm gonna scale that down a little bit like that. Okay, let's give this guy some sort of air thing going on. I know that we had the if I get the reference, this guy had some sort of antennas with little thing going up like that. So let's try and do something that's similar to that. Um, Actually, let me just copy his neck for that real quick. And I'm gonna snap rotate it again by holding J. And it's actually already pretty much the right size. I think his head is actually a little narrow. So do we still, yeah, we still have the original polycube for that. So this is interesting because I should be able to increase the depth without, so this is very interesting. As I said in the previous video, you have all these nodes going on, and if you don't delete them, you can still, like I can still go and change a lot of stuff about this um, without sort of interfering with the bevel operation that we had done. So for instance, if I had chosen to commit the bevel already, that would mean that I wouldn't have this control anymore. Now, wouldn't have been the biggest problem in the world because I would have just been able to sort of drag some vertices over there and create a wider head. But it just goes to show that sometimes waiting to delete some of those um, nodes, especially when it comes to having primitives like this, can be quite useful because now we still have the opportunity to make his head a little bit wider, which I already did. So there we go. And his neck can be a bit wider as well. There we go. like that. So now we have this thing, and let's give him a pair of ears, I guess you would call them. Um, I'm going to go to vertex again, and I'm going to go to shift control right mouse button and go two faces. So it immediately gives me all the faces. And then I'm going to do a extrude with an offset once again. There we go. And 10, let's make it 12. 12 seems good. And I'm going to hit G to extrude once again. And there we go. Let me check see how long I've been recording. It's another hour already. I'm talking so much, and we still have so much to do with this guy. I'm gonna go for an hour, and after that, we'll see how far we get. And I'll make a third one to sort of finish it up. So let's see here. I think what I want to do now is create a torus, actually. I know that we were supposed to create a torus for his hand, but we chose for a cylinder. So now let's actually do create a torus. Where is it? There it is. Drag on the grid. And the reason I want to use a torus for this is because a torus has the nice rounded, um, nice rounded geometry already. I won't have to do that by hand. I am going to reduce the subdivisions a little bit. So really all I want from this torus is sort of this part right here, this nice part that curves up like so. I do want to give it a bit of a bigger, whoops, not the radius, but the, no, yeah, the section radius. Yeah, dragging isn't going to work out for this one. Just going to do it manually. So let's see what 0.2 gives us. That's a bit too thick. 0.15. Yeah, that could work. I might want to actually reduce the radius as well. Yeah, let's go with that. So now what I want to do is I want to delete all the faces I don't need. So we're talking about just like this little curved part right here that I want to have. So and actually I might just reduce the radius even further. Come on, 2.5. Yeah, let's go with that. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to drag select all these, and I'm going to delete them. And then I'm going to drag select all these, and whoops, delete them as well. Oh, another very useful shortcut that we haven't talked about yet. Sometimes when you're working on something, especially when it's a bit small, you might rotate or move your pan your camera around to where it's difficult to focus on it anymore. If at any time that happens, just press F and it focuses on your current selection. So for instance, if I have this selected and I'm just working on it, yada yada yada, oh wait, I messed up my camera. What happened? How do I get it back? Just press F and it should be able to bring you right back to where you were. Very useful. Um, let's see. Now I want to turn on my highlights again. I'm going to bring this over here. And I'm just going to sort of manually line it up a little bit. Again, this is something, all the stuff with the lining up, it's something that I do because I found that it sort of helps me, or it sort of prevents me from getting into trouble later down the line, but it's not like super that you don't have to be like super precise with everything. I know a lot of great modelers that are a lot less neurotic when it comes to getting everything lined up the way that I like to have it. So yeah. So what I want to do now is I could fill this hole like we did previously. So selecting the entire outer perimeter edge of this part right here, and then going to Shift right mouse button and fill hole. But that's not actually necessary because we're not going to see any of this. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm simply going to select the entire outer perimeter and hold down Shift and then drag. If I don't have my constraints turned on, Shift drag, and you can see it just creates new geometry for us. When you have an object selected like this and you Shift drag, you copy it. But when you have a component selected, like for instance an edge, and you Shift drag, it does an extrusion. And you actually see it says it right at the arrow that you have selected. It says extrude next to your cursor, so that's very useful. Um, yeah, it's really handy. So let's just plunk it in like that, and then drag this up a little bit further. And now if you want to top it off with a little ball, we can create a ball just by going to Control Shift right mouse button and selecting sphere, and we can create a little sphere for this guy. Da-da-da-da. And let's give it a little less subdivisions because it's a little crazy. One of the things you might start to notice as well when you're modeling like this is it's especially evident if you turn off the highlights for the edges, is that you'll get sometimes some pretty ugly artifacting where you, instead of having a nice rounded sphere, you can very clearly see all these little faces, all these little polygons. And of course, that doesn't look very good. And if you export a model like this will actually show up in Engine as well. So we have to do something about this. And you can even see it right here. If you zoom in, you can even see a pretty clear division on the lines where we did our bevel. Even though it's supposed to be rounded, you can still see a pretty hard edge. So that doesn't look very good. So we probably want to gonna do something about that. And it's very easy to fix, luckily. So um, different 3D software works in different ways when it comes to smoothing. Um, in 3ds Max, for instance, you have smoothing groups, which is quite arbitrary, if you ask me. I think Maya has a much more elegant solution when it comes to this sort of stuff. Um, so yeah, it sort of depends, but the way Maya does this is if you select an edge, in this case I'm just going to select all these edges because I want them all smooth, and then go to Shift right mouse button. We go to our polygonal modeling marking menu, and you'll see a little menu right here that says soften, harden edge. And when you hover over it, you get another menu, and then when you select soften edge, you'll see that it now really literally softens all those hard edges. And this has nothing to do with editing the geometry itself. It's purely lighting. It's purely how light rays are reflected and bounce back into the camera. Um, so it's a very sort of lightweight uh, thing you can change to make your model look better. And I'm actually going to do it with all the edges of this thing as well. So I'm just going to go soften edge, and you'll see that it looks a lot nicer. It looks a lot more like an actual curved pipe thing. And you can also select individual edges and do the same. So I can actually show you real quick if I turn off highlights once again. If I, for instance, select these two edges and do soften edge. Um, Whoops, I wanted to deselect them. Now you can very clearly see the difference between what we had prior and on this side and what a softened edge looks like. It just looks a lot better. So I'm not going to do it to all edges individually, so I'm just going to select everything and do a soften edge. And now you can see we have a nice, smoothly rounded edge on all sides of our cube. So let's give him some eyes as well, shall we? I think that would be nice to give him some eyes. And that'll actually allow me to show a new feature as well, which is very useful when it comes to, especially when it comes to modeling characters. You want to start working with symmetry pretty soon because it saves you a lot of time. So we're gonna be doing some symmetry operations in a second here. So I just created a new torus and I'm just gonna rotate it into place and I'm gonna give him a little eye like that. And let's see here. Let's give him 15. 14 subdivisions. You can see with the torus that you have two different, when you look on the right in the channel box editor, you can see that you have two different attributes that you can change the subdivisions on because you both have the amount of loops like this, which go across the donut shape, I guess, and loops like this, which go around the donut shape or the torus shape. I always call it a donut because that's what it is to me. Okay, so let's see. I want to make them a little bit bigger, I think. So I'm gonna make the radius 0.4. Yeah, that looks cute. And section radius can be a little bit lower, 0.05. Yeah, that's cool. So okay. Let's see here. So yeah, I think what I want to do is I want to get rid of some polygons. That's what I want to do. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to select these edges to begin with because these are going to be polygons that you're not going to see either way. Actually, I just want to select these two. And again, this is whenever I need to select multiple polygons, um, in a loop like this, I often don't select the polygons, but I select the edges or the vertices because it's just quicker because I need to select less. So I can just go to two faces like this and go delete. And instead of having to select every edge loop like this, I have I have all the polygons that I want to gone immediately instead of having to go and select them like this and then go delete. I'm not going to delete the entire model, but you get what I'm trying to say. So, and now what we can actually do is a lot of fun. We can do the same thing that we did uh, with our antenna over here, where we extruded the edges with the move tool. We can do the same with the scale tool. So if I hold down shift and I scale inward, you can see that it creates this new geometry for us, like that. And now if I want to create an eye, I just go back to the move tool, hold down shift, and I do it again. And I go back to the scale tool, hold down shift, and do it again. And there we go. We have an eye, sort of. But you get what I'm trying to say. This, if you get used to working like this, you can just speed up your workflow so much, and it's really going to save you a lot of time. And in the end, when it comes to creating digital art, that's often what it comes down to. Is you want to save time because when you're working for clients or you're working on a game, time is money. So I'm just gonna collapse these edges real quick by going to Shift right mouse button and going to let's see, merge collapse edges, and I'm gonna say collapse edge. Actually, I want to collapse them to the center. Uh, merge edges to center. That's the one I wanted. And now we have an eye. Yeah, looks pretty good. So I think that concludes. Yeah, I'm exactly on an hour. I think that concludes the second video. In the third video, I'm going to finish up the lag real quick, and I'm going to show you guys how to mirror everything. So we have everything in duplicated, and we can just uh, start going right ahead and start adding some more details instead of having to do everything again manually. Okay, see you guys in the next one.